So here's another example that was shared with me in terms of uh, kind of inspiration to get to. So here's again kind of this interesting bird's nest pavilion with this kind of cool inner and outer circle. And again, this was inspired by the Ongreening Pavilion. Obviously, there's some differences. This one's using kind of these flat, kind of more ribbon-like material. I'm using examples of pipe. They've inserted also doorways, but those are obviously some minor things. But like I said, we just want to kind of look at how do we get to that form. So again, there's kind of a couple different things going on with this. And what's nice again, it doesn't require a lot of effort to get there. So you're basically creating some arcs and then you're starting to do all sorts of kind of cool twisting and connecting of them all. And it's a lot of kind of copy and paste. So you can even see just overall the script's pretty simple. And what you have to actually do in Rhino is also very simple. So if I just go ahead and turn this off, and show you what I have is I have an outer circle, this inner circle, and this middle uh, curve that's gonna kind of help us determine those angles. So what we can do now is go ahead and jump in to see how this works, right? So we're creating our arc this way. We start to play with our height in this case over there. We do a little bit of kind of shifting things around. You'll see that we do a lot of shifting in order to kind of get all sorts of interesting angles and stuff. But for the most part, like I said, it's pretty simple and straightforward. And you can obviously determine how dense you want that to be. So let me just, again, kind of stick with this main structure. So this is kind of the main element, and obviously you can play with how dense you want that to actually be. It does lag a little bit more this in this example, but it's still very kind of maneuverable. So like I said, let's go ahead and just jump in. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and do File, New Document, and what I want to do is reference each curve separately. So I've got my inner curve, I've got my middle curve, and I'm gonna have my outer curve. From here, we're gonna go ahead and just divide these as well. So I'm gonna do that. So here's this one, and this one. So there's our points. And then we want to just use the same slider for all of them. That's really important in order to kind of get all the framing to match up with each other. So it is going to look really dense in the center and then not as much on the outside, and that's okay. You can obviously adjust that accordingly. So from here, we can start to, again, really kind of focus on our middle curve to get a specific height and kind of angle to it too. We don't want it to just be perfectly planar. We want it to have kind of that example, like this kind of curve or this kind of angle to those arches as well. So what we want to do is move those points a certain amount. And again, we're going to use our graph mapper to do so. So I'm going to go to sets to create a range of values. Again, I want to use the same input there, but again, you can see this gives me 50 points. This gives me, unfortunately, 51. So I'm just going to, again, give it a very simple expression of x minus 1. And now I can apply a graph mapper. And in this case, I'm going to, again, use this Gaussian curve, because again, it's important that they do kind of come back together. So whatever the start is and the end, that they're at the same area. And I am going to kind of adjust it to look something more like that. I am in this case going to go ahead and give myself some values. So in the y, I'm going to do something like 8, and this one to be 12. So that's the highest one. The lowest one is 8. And you'll see immediately when I decide to move these in the z direction, we have that kind of angle for it now. So that's where we start off with that. And this is where it's pretty simple to create a arc. So I'm going to go to curve, primitive, and use the arc 3 points. So I've got my inner points, my middle points, and my end points. You'll see that we start to get this kind of interesting form to it. And we can kind of leave it there, or we can do some other kind of minor changes for it. So if we wanted to kind of twist a little bit, I can take the points, in this case the inner ones, and let's go to sets, list, and shift. So again, I'm going to just pick some value, maybe like 0 less than 30 to not get too crazy with it. And that'll be re-input into there. So you can see as I start to twist that around, I get all sorts of different angles. You might get something really weird, so be careful with that. I believe I did it for the inner one. Let's just double check. Yep, so it was, in fact, that one. So, like I said, sometimes you want to do it maybe for the outer one, but it's kind of up to you. But try not to get too crazy with it. The other thing, too, is that if you twist this, and this one's kind of, the outer one's staying in the same, you probably want to also do something with the middle one as well. So I'm going to do the same thing of shifting the middle points as well. But in that case, I'm not going to go like the same distance. I want to actually do half the distance, so x times 0.5. So that way it goes from like these shifted over 9, this shifted over half of that, and that should kind of keep it even. And you can see that that does kind of clean it up a little bit, so I can maybe exaggerate it a little bit more. And it does create this kind of nice spiral in that case, right? So if it's 0, it's going that way, and this starts to kind of, again, I'm kind of paying attention to this inner part. I don't want it to kind of start to bow inwards so much, so that's why I have it kind of doing something like that. And that has, again, some kind of nice curve to it. That profile you also want to kind of be mindful of, so you can always kind of adjust it that way too. So it is one of those things where you can really kind of play around with and get it to have a certain kind of profile too. You can obviously adjust this as well. Again, you don't want to really change the offset because you want it to start and end in the same area. However, you can adjust it this way. Right, you can have it really kind of go up or something. So yeah, do with that as you may. So in this case, now we got kind of that main kind of skeleton. So it's, what's nice is that I can easily just go ahead and go to here, go to surface and create a pipe. In this case, I'm going to keep it pretty thin since it is the radius, not the diameter. And you can see, especially on the inside, it almost becomes solid, which maybe that's what you want, maybe not. It's kind of up to you, but I'm going to keep mine pretty thin. So that way there is some kind of transparency to it. Maybe this is a little bit more kind of intimate. There's might be something going on in there that has a little more kind of cover and protection versus the outer side. But yeah, it's kind of, you get to play around with those parameters that way. So now we want to kind of create that crazy kind of network of everything. So what we want to do is take our curves and start to divide them and shift those around as well. So I'm going to do curve, divide, use something like 15. And this is where, again, it gets kind of tricky to make sure you do in the correct order. So what I want to do first is go to sets. In this case, I want it to go in the, I'll actually keep it in this same kind of orientation, but I'm going to shift it a little bit more. So in order to do that, I want to first go to tree, flip the matrix, and then shift it this way. So list, shift. And what's good is that this does take a little bit of time, but then once you get it done, then you can just copy and paste it a bunch of times. So I want each one to kind of, each one of these points, instead of it going this way, they're going to start to jump to the next one. So um, what I want to do is make sure that it goes to jumps 1, then it jumps 2, then jumps 3. So I do want to create a series based off of the number. So again, I'm going to start with 0 so it stays in that original spot. I can use, again, this is giving me 16 points. So I want to make sure this is also giving me 16. So I'm going to go to expression, do x plus 1. So I have the same number. And I'll go ahead and drag that here. If I keep it at the step 1, you'll see that it just easily goes from this one to that one to that one. So now that I've shifted it, I need to reflip it. So I'm going to drag that into there. I also want to graph to this so that each one is doing it respectively to each group. So there's that shift. Now I can go ahead and go to curve and create, again, an interpolated curve from that. And you'll see that now I've got them kind of the same number going in each direction. If you want that angle to be steeper, so you can see it goes from there to there to there. If you want it to jump even more, you can give it another slider. So let's say you want it to jump 5. So now you can see it goes from this one, goes all the way to whatever that 5th one is, or sorry, the 5th one over. So that one, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, or sorry, it's a little bit more. So that's how you can kind of control how steep you want that angle, right? You can almost have it go almost perfectly horizontal. So you can start to play with it that way. The next thing you want to do is, again, you might want that same level of density, or maybe you want to, again, kind of randomize it. So what you can do now is go to, again, sets, sequence, and random reduce. So we can go ahead and flatten these and drag that in. Then we can just pick, like, how many do we want to remove? Do we want to do a percentage? Do we want to do an actual specific number? That's kind of up to you, but I'm just going to reduce it by half. And again, it's not going to be just any, it's going to be just some random kind of sequence, right? So some are still going to be close together. Some are going to have more gaps. So maybe you want to reduce it even more. Maybe you want to play with the seed value. So you get all sorts of different kind of configurations, right? So this is how you start to kind of give it that random density of curve. So I'm going to continue to remove a little bit more because I do want to have quite a bit of fluctuation in all these things. So let's go ahead and turn this stuff off. So you get to start to have definitely a lot of fun with this part. So I'm going to, again, copy and paste that. This will basically give me my last piece, and I'm going to make these even a little bit thinner so they are just simple pipes, so these can start to intersect with those larger ones. And so now you just want to basically copy and paste this and begin to create some different variations. So in this case, instead of just going in the same kind of general direction, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to reverse it. So I'm going to go to list, reverse, do it that way. And so now they're going in the opposite direction. If I want, I can reduce even more. I can change the step size, and maybe it's just 1. Right, so this is where, again, you get to have a lot more kind of variation to this, right? I'll play with the different kind of seed configurations. So maybe you want to have this one a little bit more dense. I don't know. It's, again, kind of, you have a lot of freedom doing that, where, again, I'll still stick with that kind of reverse one, but in this case, maybe I'll, again, make them a little bit more angled, like really angled. Maybe I'll have a lot less, or at least somewhat less. Change the seed again. So it's just a matter of kind of creating multiple of these iterations to get a certain kind of density and character to this. So I'm going to do it just one more time. In this case, I'm going to not reverse it. So it's pretty simple to just kind of flip some of these things around. Let's do something like step size of 4. Again, play with the density a little bit more. So actually, let's make this even less. So you get all sorts of kind of crazy angles and iterations, which is nice. So yeah, like I said, it's pretty simple to get to this end product of just literally kind of copying and pasting, as long as you kind of remember this process of flipping your point order so that it goes in the different direction and shifting it. That's where, again, you can kind of get thrown a little bit. And again, you can even go back because it shouldn't be that much of a hassle to move some of these things. So maybe you kind of want to even shift that original angle a little bit more. So you can have all sorts of kind of different parameters. In this case, it's a little bit more of like this wider funnel versus the more narrow one. But again, you can play with it in all sorts of different ways and get quite a variety of different iterations. You can, again, continue to play with this angle for its general form. Maybe make it even higher in some areas. All right, really kind of have it blow up a little bit. But yeah, that's how you can start to get to that product. Again, pretty simple. Just a lot of kind of copying of steps. If you really want that kind of base curve, so I would probably use the same thickness and just use it for this curve, right? So now I have a base. Once you kind of get that, it'd probably be good to just bake these into their own kind of respective layer, and then you can start to use a shape for your entryway and use the Boolean and trim it out that way. Then you can use that same curve as it intersects to cut it out. So what's good too is that you could actually you can actually create a solid surface of this as well. This is pretty neat. You can basically use your arcs as your profile curve for a sweep. So let's go ahead and do surface, freeform, and we are going to sweep 2. So we're going to use both our inner curve and our outer curve. And then we're going to use our arc to make it into a surface. So there you go. So now you actually have a solid. So you could even start to kind of maybe, in there, what's nice is that it stays nice and flush with everything for the most part, it looks like. Some cases, maybe not as much if you use the other curve. So the polyline curve, it'll be a little bit closer, but you do kind of lose some of the roundness. But you could start to use these to split it and maybe make some of these openings actually solid with the material. So again, you have a lot of freedom of what you can start to do in terms of its overall character with some pretty minor steps.